Well, we've made it to the home stretch. Just got to get through the next couple of hours before things really start to wind down and the end of this, well, nuisance for sure, but even a little bit of hazardous conditions, or that's all going to start to get better from here. So that's good news in the forecast. But we do still have some issues. They're going to have some areas that are going to have some problems. The Hal Rogers Parkway all the way from Perry County towards London, that's going to be a little bit of ice covering in some of those areas, but also the Cumberland Parkway out towards Somerset, likely getting some freezing rain as well. That extends all the way up towards Breathitt County, gets into a little bit of Magoffin as well. This is moving north and east, so eventually Floyd is in the path and Northern Pike as well, where some of the higher terrain already getting some of that freezing rain as well. Maybe a little bit more of a cold rain down in the valleys, but that will fill in due time. You do have some flakes or likely even some sleet that's starting to fall in some areas like Madison County, Garrett, all the way out towards Boyle. And then you've got a little bit more of that and some freezing rain just off to the east of Glasgow at this point. Continuing to push off towards the north and the east. But once again, as this line moves across, it will be wrapping up, and that will be the end of this system, where anywhere between quarter of an inch for a lot of areas for ice accumulations all the way up to over a half of an inch in some areas out towards Elizabethtown and some of our western counties. But we were lucky enough to not get that high. It was just kind of sitting between that quarter of an inch up to about 3/4 of an inch, or excuse me, up to 3/10 of an inch, where there were certainly some issues being had on the roadways and some power outages as well. This is about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You see how the ending of that precipitation moves off towards the east. It's just cloud coverage beyond that. Maybe a few drizzle, freezing drizzle showers, possibly a few flurries or even some ice pellets. Certainly possible throughout the next few hours, but it's certainly not going to put down much for accumulation. So getting throughout the next several hours is what we need to do. We still have our ice storm warning in effect. You see it's pretty much Interstate 64 and south, whereas the bluegrass, including Fayette County, or at least the northern bluegrass, has been canceled. Basically just saying that in these areas we still have that chance for accumulating ice, but by no means does it mean that anything north of Interstate 64 is no longer dangerous. It certainly still is and will be throughout tonight and through tomorrow morning as well. So once again, no reason to be out on the roads if you don't absolutely have to. With ice accumulation, another 1/10 of an inch, maybe a 1/4 of an inch at most. And that's kind of on the generous side. I think for the most part we stay between maybe a couple of 1/10 of an inch at best for that ice accumulation the rest of the afternoon. You see our amounts that we had picked up across much of the area, the bulk of it being out towards Elizabethtown, where anywhere between disruptive and hazardous, that was the two categories that we stayed in for the day today. Nowhere near that crippling or catastrophic, which was what we had for the 03 ice storm, the 09 ice storm, those areas. And those time frames were certainly very dangerous, and it stayed for quite a while with power outages and just staying off the roads. But what's happening? What's causing this? Because if you've been watching the temperature at your location, it's been sitting in the 20s. So why is it that we're getting rain falling to the ground? Well, the reason being is because we have a very thick layer of above freezing temperatures sitting just above the freezing temperatures at the surface. So when the snow falls from the upper levels of the atmosphere getting into this big area of above freezing air, it has a chance to melt. But it does not have a chance to turn back to freezing precipitation before it touches the ground. So it falls as rain. It looks like rain. But everything at the surface that is freezing will get that little bit of a sheen of ice. And that's what's been happening over the last 24 hours. So you see this big cold air mass. This is what's coming up next. We are going to get rid of the precipitation today, but we keep the cold. And that cold has to go somewhere. Well, it's going to head east towards us. And as we go into the end of the weekend, and next week, things will be very, very cold. Bundle up for sure type of weather. Single-digit lows certainly possible, and wind chills that could get into the negative values. On top of that, we have a chance for snow and even maybe some freezing rain throughout next week. But of course, time will tell how much we get from that. For sure, you could prepare for a lot of cold.